It is the third official workday of the week. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions right here on Flow 94.9 FM. This is the Flow of God's own state, where we take a critical look at the issues as it affects our dear nation, Nigeria, and also as it affects our dear state, ABIA state. Of course, it is still part of our morning show, the one we call Morning Spice, right here on the Flow of God's own state. My name is Michael Oni. Now, this morning, we're talking education. Why? Well, today, we're talking education because the 2021 Global Action Week for Education runs from the 26th of April till 30th of April 2021 with the theme Education Finance. And of course, actions and activities undertaken during this week is on securing an increase in the public financing of education to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. Well, it's no longer news that education in Nigeria has become under threat from multiple fronts. Threats of poor funding, from constant shortfalls in expected budgetary appropriations for the sector, which has been largely contended by stakeholders. Now, this sector, education sector, seems to have suffered highest disruption due to unending strike by workers who alleged government neglect and the failure to attend to their needs. And pupils are leaving public schools in drives. Instructional materials are near absent, condition of service is poor. Then close to this is the threat of security, which has become the order of the day, looking at what is happening in the country. The security of pupils, the security of students, the security of university workers can no longer be guaranteed. Just a couple of days ago, we heard, 2 days ago, we heard about the death of two more students of Greenfield University in Kaduna, a private university. 2 more from those kidnapped, and they are either kidnapped in numbers by kidnappers, bandits, or schools run over by unknown assailants, leaving them under fears. Now, today on the platform, we're focusing on the global action for education, which we have zeroed down. Of course, it's been zeroed down on the theme for education as education financing, and we have guests from CSACEFA. CSACEFA, yeah, great, CSACEFA, interesting. And if you wonder what is CSACEFA is the Civil Society Action Coalition and Education for All. And I've got Mr. Richard OKORO. He's a regular when it comes to having thoughts on issues as far as the civil society angle is concerned. Mr. Richard OKORO is the service delivery of the Open Government Partnership. You're welcome. Glad to have you join us this morning on the platform.
Good morning, listeners.
All right, great. And I have Miss EUNICE EGBUNA. Mrs. EUNICE EGBUNA, the state coordinator of CSACEFA. Glad to have you join us also this morning.
Thank you very much.
I will be beginning with you. You are a mother,
listeners, yes.
And you must have a sympathy for what is happening in the education sector as far as security is concerned. Our students are no longer safe in schools. If you think it is happening only in the north, we have our own fair share right here in the southern part of the country. What are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you very much for that question. Like you rightly said, as a mother, I feel so concerned. I visited some schools and I found out that they don't even have walls. You don't have any fence. If people can then go into places that have fences, then what are you talking about? Those people that are just left like that. So it's a problem, and we are calling on government to do something. Not only the government, even the communities where the schools are located, they can do something because they can have their own vigilante. Our students and pupils are no longer safe. These things have gone into them and they are afraid, some of them.
Just a couple of days ago, weeks ago now, the students, the pupils at a particular primary school, public primary school in Afara, very close to Flow FM, had to be driven home because of some suspected substance.
Yes.
Saying explosives found. And I know it's worrisome to members of the civil society, and this has been called. You've been talking about this, not today. What do you think will be the way forward?
In that regard, I think what the government should do, because they have been afraid of saying that if you have security people around, that students will be afraid. We have to mobilize and educate them. Let them create the awareness so that when they see such people around outside the compound, they should not be afraid. They'll come to school because the people are there watching over. Then there should also be some, kind of cleanup Let them bring in the security agencies to the school compound, because you don't know the schools where they can still find those things.
All right. We're going to get to the nitty-gritty of that conversation, that aspect of security in our schools later on this morning. But let me bring in Mr. Richard here. The theme for this week's, for this year's Global Action Week for Education financing. A lot of persons might be hearing that for the first time. Education financing. I know we've heard about education, we heard about finance, and combining these two words together, making education financing. Can you let us into that?
Yes, financing is financing in every aspect or perspective. But in this particular Global Action Week on education financing, we want to look at the commitment of the critical stakeholders. You know, when we talk about critical stakeholders, we're not only looking at the government, even though that the government are the big players in financing education. We also look about the communities where we come from, where these schools are sited. They have also civic responsibility. The parents have responsibility as well. So when you talk about financing, it goes a whole lot of physical infrastructure, equipment, capacity building for the teachers, payment of salaries, and then, like she rightly mentioned, you know, providing security, which has become the intent now for education. Because when you talk about financing, and security is very core, you know, it's very, very key, because of the things that are happening now, you can't talk of financing of education and then you don't mention the security aspect. So when we talk about funding or financing of education, we also have to look at what is the position of the state government in the budget, budgetary allocation for education. What is the place of education in Abia State? And then when we look at what we have, we compare it to what the UNESCO policy on education is saying, and then we ask ourselves, are we really in the right track? Are we getting to the promised land? Then if not, what else can the stakeholders come together to do to ensure that planning or financing in education gets to where it should be, which includes the security aspect, which is now a very big challenge to our communities.
Okay, let's look at financing proper. This year, Nigeria's education sector was allocated much lower than the 26% of the national budget recommended by the United Nations. Less than 26%. Now, let's be very specific. In the budget presented to the National Assembly and signed by President Muhammadu Buhari, the country allocated only about 5.6% of the 2021 budget to education, the lowest in about 10 years. If we take a look at these statistics past the previous years, you will see that none of the years had up to 10% of the total budget allocated to education. And we've come at a time that education is the major problems we're facing. We're facing a lot of problems in the education sector. One of the areas that have received added attention by government, by politicians, they will come out and say, well, education free for all every time. And it is generally believed that developing African countries like Nigeria, education is the key that unlocks all the forces of the economic growth and development. In all this, with these indices, with these statistics, what do you think? Is it that we are not paying more attention, or the government is not even serious about the issue of education in the country, despite all these challenges that we have facing the education sector in Nigeria?
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Richard.
Okay. That is the same point I introduced earlier. When you look at the budget for education in Nigeria and down to Abia State, and you look at the enormous challenges that is required for a standard education to be funded, you will find out that there is a huge gap. Like you rightly said, in the past 10 years, the lowest budget allocation.
That's about 5-point-something percent.
So it is really worrisome.
Which is a far cry from the 26% recommended by
it's really worrisome.
By UNESCO.
It's really worrisome. Because, you know, the coronavirus pandemic has exposed a whole lot of lapses. And in the education sector, you find out that what we are currently having is a far cry from the universal standard that we expected to be. So It's an opportunity for us to all come back to the planning table to look at funding for education. Like I said, it's not only about the government that does the funding. We have the private institutions. There are corporate social responsibilities that so many institutions, oil companies, banks can also come in. But then what is the roadmap? We're expecting to draw a roadmap that will accommodate all these players, and then we can come to a common terms and say, this is what we need. Considering the way things are moving, considering the security threats, these are the way, like during the coronavirus, students were sent home. How many schools in ABIA had this virtual learning exercise that was going on in states like Lagos and other states in Nigeria? What we had was the analog BCA radio program, where the teacher will be teaching without anybody seeing him or her. It wasn't what we had anticipated. But coronavirus came in and told us that we are far from the reality of funding education in Abia State. So that is why this Global Action Week for Education, Financing, or Funding is very, very key for us. And that is why we are here today to share our views that CSACEFA, which is the Civil Society Coalition, Action Coalition for Education for All, is calling on the critical stakeholders, to see that financing for education is very, very key at this point in time.
All
for
right.
our children.
We'll get even much more deeper into the conversation this morning as, of course, we're celebrating the Global Action Week for Education with the theme Education Financing. As we look at those stakeholders that are responsible for financing education, of course, let us out of this rut that we are. It is the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions right here on Flow 94.9 FM. We take a breather now. When we return, we continue the conversation. At Flow 94.9 FM, we've got conducive and well-secured environment for business, high-tech video studio, a state-of-the-art production studio. You can also listen live on www.flow949fm.com and watch our videos on YouTube at Flow FM TV. Flow 94.9 FM, not just radio, but a complete broadcasting house. All right, thank you very much for staying tuned. If you've just joined us, it is still the platform. Of course, it is part of our morning show, Morning Spice, right here on Flow 94.9 FM, the flow of Carson State. And of course, we're looking at education, looking at the threats of poor funding from constant shortfall in expected budgetary appropriations for the sector vis-a-vis the insecurity in the country, affecting the education sector also. This morning, just as we're celebrating the Global Action Week for Education. It's a yearly event, and of course, this year's theme is education financing. I have been speaking with a guest from CSACEFA. CSACEFA is the Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All, and Mr. Richard OKORO of the Service Delivery of the Open Government Partnership, and also the state coordinator of CSACEFA, Mrs. EUNICE EGBUNA. And I have joining me this morning Dr. OKO IGBOKWE, former from the State Education Management Board, former Deputy Executive Secretary of the State Education Management Board. Glad to have you join us this morning, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
We've not seen it this bad in the education sector in Nigeria. Am I correct?
Yeah, sure.
Especially as insecurity is affecting the education sector in the country. Kidnapping every day, killing of some of those kidnapped students. It looks like the education sector is well threatened in the country, Nigeria. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the issue is funding, basically funding. And like my colleagues have rightly pointed out, the Nigerian government, the state government, both in Abia State, they have not really funded education the way it should be. For instance, in Abia State, the funding is for this year's budget for education is about 6.7 billion. And when you look at funding into basic institutions in education in Abia State, you find out that we have low funding for ASUBEB, low funding for SEMB, and as a result, you find out that things are not properly done. Like my colleague have already pointed out, the education sector in Abia State had not really been funded properly, even in Nigeria, the percentage funding in Nigeria is about 7%, while UNESCO said we should fund education about 26%. In ABIA, as a matter of fact, it is even 4% funding in education. So it has affected all facets of the educational sector in Nigeria and also in Abia State. If you look at the schools in Abia State, we have about 250 secondary schools in Abia State. All the secondary schools in Abia State are dilapidated. None is working fine. We are not going to talk about issues about infrastructure, instructional materials, or even basic salaries. It's not something you mention in Abia State. You find out that both the students, the pupils, the teachers, and all colleagues in the teaching profession, they are totally enchanted. Nothing is working out fine. Even the security threat. In fact, though it had not really encroached in Abia, it's basically coming down. And it's everywhere in Nigeria. This thing, as far as 2014, the school system in Nigeria had collapsed. Nothing is working out fine, except the federal government.
Why would you say as far as 2014, the school system in Nigeria has collapsed? As far back as 2014?
Yes.
Why will you say that? What are some of these pointers?
Because if you look at encroachment, the security problem in Nigeria, it started within that period when the Boko Haram, the Chibok girls, it's coming down gradually. It's even had reached Enugu State. It's coming down.
But is there a connection between financing and security in the education sector?
Yes, very clear. Very, very clear. In fact, I had an experience just this weekend. A school in my village, parents, they comes to the school and then attack both the students, the teachers, because they don't have security or gate men in the school. In fact, in all the schools in Abia State, you hardly see security people working there. In those days, we used to have security people, that protect both the properties in the school, the school facilities, the teachers and the students. There is no more security people in the school. What is the reason? Because they are no more being paid. They are no more being recruited. It's money that is the issue. Like the school in my village, the security man died about 3 years ago, and they have not replaced they have not replaced the security person.
Okay, I'm going to return to Mrs. Eunice in the studio. As a member of the civil society, have you gone down into checking the books, the amount of money earmarked for education, especially in Abia State? And if yes, what have you noticed?
Yes, we started with advocacy, like Josie told you that I just took over, I just took over by December. Good. So from that period, we'll be making efforts, to see those in the authority, like ASUBEB and all that. We've not been able to see them, but we're still working on that. So we decided to go to the schools themselves to find out what they have and what the schools, what they lack. For instance, yesterday I was in the school for the deaf and mentally retarded, Market Road and Aba. I went there and I saw the HM. They narrated their problems. They said that they need these special books and that they don't have these special teachers, that will give the sign languages to teach those people. And then the books that they have each cost 500 naira. But that the pupils cannot access the books. So they are calling on government and then the other people, other stakeholders who can do that to help them. So it's a problem.
So are you saying that a lot has not been devoted into education, especially fund, especially in Abia State?
That is what I'm saying. Because when I went there, somebody was telling me that during the time of Jonathan, that they used to have books, free books, which they will share to the students and the pupils.
But where is this lacuna coming from? Is it from the state government or the federal government? Because some of these educational materials, I understand some are given free, while the students are to get some of these materials themselves.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. The person was inside, give an example, that during Jonathan that we are having those books. Then I went to find out. That was what I discovered, that in Abia State, from 2011, 2012, 2017, 18, and 19, that they have not been able to access the UBEC fund. which they are supposed to pay 50% counterpart fund. Do you understand? For them to access it, they will not be able to do that. Why? Because either they are not able to retire the ones they have collected, or because they cannot, or they don't want to. There's no political will.
I know that fund is a World Bank assisted fund,
yes.
UBEC, given to states,
yes.
and they have to part away with a sum of money called the counterpart fund.
Yeah.
Are you saying that ABIA state is yet to access?
As I'm telling you, I
have
have the document 2011, 2012, 2016, 17, 18, and 19.
Okay, let's delve into it. This is getting more interesting. Let's delve into the implication of not accessing such a fund.
Okay.
If we have such, it should be going to millions of naira.
Exactly.
I'm correct now.
Yes.
So if we are yet to
billion or something.
Billion?
Yes.
Okay, if we are yet to access such a fund, what are the implications of not accessing such fund to the education sector in Abia State?
Okay. One, incessant strikes because the salaries are not paid.
Are they expected to pay salary from that money also?
Well, if they are not supposed to pay from it, I'm not sure, I cannot say. But at least they will use the one they are using for salaries to pay salaries, then they will use these ones to work on the schools. There are no books, no good infrastructure like mentioned. The teachers are not being retrained, just like my friend mentioned. They're not updated on the new technology that people are using now. So it's a problem. And then few teachers on the school. Go to a school, you find out there are about 6 or 7 supposed to take people from SS1 or SS1 to SS3. Do you understand what I'm saying? So all those things are the problems we are having in the schools.
Okay.
So
the topic, Mr. Richard, the subtopic is education financing. And it seems we've been talking about the public schools. Are there not challenges in the private schools? Let's widen the conversation beyond the public schools in Abia State.
Yes, there are a whole lot of challenges. Considering that a lot of mushroom primary, secondary schools are springing up every day. We don't have a standard. Because if we have a standard, you wouldn't see a primary school in a warehouse, for instance. You wouldn't see a primary school in a small warehouse that is also containing a church. It's also for kindergarten and primary school.
But it looks like education is expensive.
No,
so people will have to resort into
there must be a standard. There must be a standard, which is what is the guiding principle for any sector to develop. You don't just come from nowhere and then begin to have, because you want to have cheap education, then you lower the standard. Now, it's all about in a competitive market where people now have to outsmart each other to be the best school. Each time they keep saying Abia students had the best result in WAEC and other. The question is it in public school or are they in private schools? Now, most of the private schools are also not being monitored. During the examinations, a lot of things go into play. They also outsmart each other to get their pupils to get the best results. These are the issues. So when you talk about a private school, there is no appropriate mechanism put in place to check the excesses of what is happening in those schools. Now you come to parents. How many of them takes a percentage of their children's performance in school? Last time, about a year or two, I was in this program, we talked about when they introduced this scratch card method of checking results. You know, there's a lot of students that are in primary and secondary schools don't even have their results from year to year. So how do you check performances of that child in the education sector? Like she said, if the state has not been assessing UBEC funds, it will affect education in Abia State in a whole lot of ways. I mentioned the lockdown, which we recently experienced. How many schools has a virtual system where they can use to teach? How many schools has computers? Which is supposed to be a very common thing for every child.
Okay, interesting. You've been able to list some of these issues. It looks like these are some of the issues that some strata of the masses are able to overcome because they have money, they have wealth, and they can access quality education. I'm returning to you, Doctor. Is education expensive in Nigeria or in Abia State? Let us break it down.
Yeah, let us look at first of all, look at the constitutional provision of education. The fundamental objective of the principles of Nigerian Constitution, Section 12, stated clearly that education should be free, free primary, free secondary, free university, free adult education. But there is a clause there, as when possible. As when possible.
It should be free,
yes,
but as when possible.
And then look at the general economic background of Nigeria. You find out that education at all levels should be free. But because of what my colleagues have said, we have private and public education. Public education should be free. Should be free because there is budgetary allocation for it. But because of influence of politics in education, you find out that it is no more free and there is money paid for it. But the other part of it, the private part of it, is purely business-like. It's purely a business venture where those who own the private school want to make money. There's an experience.
A business will definitely make profit.
Yes, that is a problem we are trying to resolve the other day, I and Mrs. EUNICE, where a private school demanded up to 20,000 to get a result certificate, and they were, they were not challenged about it. It was my intervention as a lawyer that made them to even bring it down. And they were even telling us that there's nothing we can do.
Now,
about
if we take a look at that from that angle, that private schools are expensive, good private schools, they are expensive, not like the mushroom ones that Mr. Richard may cited on the program this morning. If we take a look at that private schools are expensive, now, have we taken a look at what those private schools go through before putting those facilities in place also? This are some of the challenges of financing education in Nigeria. Taxation, multiple taxation, and some other challenges.
As a matter of fact, those things don't affect the payment or the financial aspect of private schools. What motivates the private schools is the urge to make money.
The urge to make money.
That is why we have explosion of private schools, and there is extreme competition. In spite of the fact that the money they put in there, the money they put in to make sure that they have nice facilities. But when you come to look at it, education is a social engagement. It is meant for the training. Though from history, from tradition, education is not cheap. I remember in those days when we were kids, we would say, akwụkwọ na-atọ ụtọ, ọ na-arahụ na mụnta, ma ọ bụrụ na nne gị na nna gị nwere ego. Look at it, nwere ego, that's have money. So from ab initio, education is not cheap. It's not cheap. You go for the best. And that's what they are following. But because of the nature of the society, education is now a social factor to make sure. Even if you compare the developing and developed countries, you find out that everybody is interested in education because it's only education that helps to develop a nation. That's why in developing countries, we tend to look at education as a means of development, and everybody should have it. That's why in the Nigerian Constitution, it is stated clearly that education should be free at all levels, so that everybody should have access to both primary, secondary, university, and adult education. So in essence, education is not something that you get freely, but because of the social nature of it, nations now provide that we should have free education that is not going to be costly, so that a lot of people will benefit from education and help in not only developing yourself, develop your family, develop your community, develop your state, develop your nation. And
do we have affordable education in Abia State? Let's break it down that way. looking at the situation that we have, the public schools, we have the private schools we have, is it affordable in Abia State?
It is not. Definitely it's not.
Okay. Mr. Richard, you want to say something?
Yes. For me, when you look at the comparative analysis
Okay.
of states like Rivers, Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, Lagos, for me, I would say that education is affordable in Abia, because I know what the highest or the most expensive school in Abia is taking for primary or secondary school. But that is what I asked. Because it is business venture, does that make the Ministry of Education not to have an oversight function of what these private schools are doing? Like you rightly asked, what multiple taxations for setting up schools and all that, does it stop the ministry or the Directorate of Inspector of Education not to know what these private schools are doing, setting a standard and say this is the standard Abia State wants to run, or this is the pattern Abia State wants to do? In as much as you are there to make money, but there must be a standard of learning. And also, if you are putting that standard, it should cut across the public schools and the private schools. That the public school is owned by government does not make it to have a lesser standard from that of the private-owned schools. That is the area I'm looking at.
Okay, just before I throw the lines open this morning, in case you're just joining us, it is the platform, the pinnacle of all discussions on Flow 94.9 FM, where we take a critical look at issues as it affect our dear nation, Nigeria, and also affect Abia State. And this morning, we're looking at education in Nigeria. Of course, it is still the Global Action Week for education, and we're talking education financing. Let's look at the issue of personnel. I want us to break it down, the issue of personnel. It should definitely affect the outcome of whatever we're putting in, because they are the one putting in the resources, both at the private sector and also the public sector. How fair have we been to the personnel in charge of education in Abia State? I'll begin with you, Mrs. Eunice. Let's do that. It's sounding like a welfare thing. So you're the mother here.
Really, it's nothing to write home about. That is why we have been having strikes upon strikes. Can you believe that the teachers in secondary school, senior secondary school, they are being owed 12 months? That's just the salary. I'm not talking about leave allowances and other allowances. That is too bad. So what do you expect a teacher to do? Is it easy for the person to put in the best and to go to school 5 times in a week?
The government, at the other hand, also has been complaining about dwindling revenue, dwindling finances, and issues with allocation and the likes. So sometimes it might be difficult blaming the state government when the revenue coming from the center is.
And when we are talking about that, there's something from there lying waste that they should go and assess and other things. Have they not been collecting taxes from the markets and other places? It is not the issue. We are talking about political will. If they desire and they know that education is important, they will do something about it. And that's why the civil society organizations were here. We talk about policies and all that. If they want CSACEFA and other people like that are concerned, we can come to education summit, a roundtable conference, and give suggestions and ideas of how these things are going to happen. They know that those people are human beings. If you don't treat anybody well, what do you expect? Okay, for instance, people are transferred from maybe from the township to the village. In those days, they used to have something like, motivational gifts for people who are staying in the villages. But because there's nothing there, some people, when they are transferred, they want to come back to the town. So you go to schools, there's no equitable distribution of teachers. Some teachers, some schools have teachers, some others don't have. All those things are something they look into. So welfare of teachers, very, very important.
The private schools, too, the personnel, the teachers are also complaining of underemployment. Let me break it down. Underpayment.
Underpayment.
We work, and at the end of the day, we go with a patronage sum of maybe 7,000, 8,000.
There's a problem there. That's why we said they should be monitored. They don't even allow them to have any union. Even those in public school, what is the sense of their union?
Are they meant to have unions?
They should allow them to at least come together so that when they have any problem, they go together. They have NAPs, the proprietors of private schools. So why would they allow their teachers also to come together? Because they don't want to lose them. So they just cage them like that. It's not good. Then when you go there, some of them are even not qualified. Sometimes when they want to do their, maybe they have idea that government is coming. Maybe they'll go and look for those who have certificates in the government schools, to come and stand in for them. Do you understand? If teachers are well paid, they will not want to do that. Like myself, as I am, somebody will come and hire me just to come and present myself for what? I will not do that. But because they are looking for a way out, when they come back from school by 2 o'clock, instead of a teacher to go and rest and sleep and mark the notes and then prepare for the next day, the person will want to go to a private school where will be paid at the end of the month. They'll give you 10,000 just to add and manage. It's not fair. So
okay, we've listed a lot of challenges this morning. We're going to delve into the solutions very soon, but I'm going to take Doctor. I would like to take Doctor on the issue of welfareism, the issue of funding in terms of vis-a-vis the personnel, both at the private sector in the education and also the public sector. What do you think about this? Some of these issues.
In ABIA, we have a general lack of welfare package for teachers in ABIA State. The question is, where is this problem? The problem emanates from budgetary allocation to education. For instance, this year, for ASUBEB, we have about 100 and something million budgeted to ASUBEB.
For the 2021 budget.
Yes. We have about...
already running.
Yes, already running. We have about 300 and something million for SEMB. But the question is, how much will they, at the end of the year, will be given to them?
So we're talking about budget performance.
Yes, in terms of salary. Now, let us look at other motivation. At the end of every school year, teachers are supposed to be paid their leave allowance. I can't remember any year for more than 20 years, teachers in ABIA have been paid their leave allowance. Now, in those days, when you're a teacher in the rural area, there is some allocation given to you because you are in the rural area. And that is why people rush to go to rural areas. That one is no more there. Now, as a game master, sports master in the school system, there is allowances given to you. Now, let's look at transfer. When you are transferred from one school to another, more especially from one local government to another local government, you are given transfer money. That one is no more existing. Science teachers are specially kept and looked after, given science allocation, science welfare package. We don't have those things again. Now, in 2014, when we were in charge of education sector, secondary school sector in Abia State, we came together and said, what is the problem? Why our teachers are no more performing? Now, teachers come to school late. Do you know why they come to school late? They will go to their shed in the market and stay for some time, and they will come back. They will
so the issue of divided attention.
Yes. Now, teachers, even those in the rural area, they go to farm to get, to do some farm work so that they can get money. So this is what we articulated and said, how do we stop this thing? We went to the government and said, can you in every 3 months pay 1 month? The government accepted. So we introduced then what is called pro rata.
What year was that?
From 2014.
2014,
yes.
Okay.
Now we introduced pro rata. We introduced what we call full management supervision. Every child in Abia State must be supervised. And we are spending almost 2 million every 3 months to do this thing. That was why, we had Abia State had first position in WAEC. And we followed it up. We recruited teachers from all schools in Abia State so that every child will be supervised. And the supervision we are doing, we will supervise you teaching in the class, we supervise your lesson note, we supervise the students, their own note you give to them. And that was why we had a relatively high level of performances, because we were paying the supervisors, we were paying the teachers once every 3 months, And we are paying you, if you come to school 3 times in a week, we'll pay you that 3 times. That was what we call pro rata that time. And teachers were motivated. They were coming to. In fact, we introduced management supervision. Before 7 o'clock, the ES, executive secretary, the DES is people that are called deputy executive, and some we supervise, and we are paying them money. We had what we call principal supervisory principals. You know, we are paying money.
It seems you're already delving into the solutions now, because if we go back to those strategies used back in the day, that was just 2014 now, we can still move beyond what we are right now. Okay. But let's get reactions from the phone lines this morning on the platform on Flow 94.9 FM, 0808 182 6949 or 0811 605 2949. Hello, good morning to you. Welcome to the platform. Good morning.
Good morning to your guests.
You're welcome. Hello.
I can hear you.
Yes, go on with your contribution. What's your name?
Oh,
the network. Can you change your location?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, go on, please.
I said I'm Hussein Nod. I'm calling from Omai.
All right, you're welcome.
Please, the educational issue should be a collective responsibility. Like in Nigeria, in ABIA State, a lot of people are not doing what they are supposed to do, including government. I'm just saying it. You will see some people that are working, even the government workers, not even politicians that have been appointed to work in ASUPEB or those people or Ministry of Education. You see them, when they retire, they won't even retire. You see them building mansions, knowing that the civil servant of their caliber or whatever can never get that. And if normally they may be your paying salary of so thing. I believe that the international communities are still helping the country, Nigeria. They are sending money. The federal house members, the senators, I believe that they map out money for education in their geopolitical zones or in the constituencies they are representing. But unfortunately, those things are not getting where it's going to go. Most times, if you are blaming governors, we blame those people that are being put in charge to take care of that. However, most of us, if maybe you are appointed to do this, after you are success, you come out and begin to see what you are supposed to get right, which you don't get right. It's not supposed to be this. Some of us is from our house.
All right.
I keep saying that constitution is the worst thing that has happened to this country.
Quickly wrap up a thought. Let's get to that reaction.
The better for us.
All right, thank you. Hello, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
You're welcome.
Good morning to our guests in the house.
Welcome.
Yeah, your topic you have this morning is a very important one, because you're talking about education, about progress, and then the economy and everything. Unlike your relationship between insurgency and the education sector. Yes, because most of the people we turn out from the universities today cannot fit in anywhere. From the primary to the secondary school, you go to the primary school, to the secondary school, it is examination malpractice. You go to the university, it is something. At the end of the day, they come out being nothing and being nobody. That is the major problem. That is why they take to violence and things like that, because they can't fit anywhere. And what is the problem? Our education sector is in shambles. In shambles. There should be a state of emergency in the education sector, my brother, because what is happening there is unprecedented presently. Teachers are not being paid, the infrastructure and everything. And we continue deceiving ourselves. During election, somebody will come and tell you that they will give you free education. The American will tell you that that thing that is free, somebody somewhere is paying for it. There is no plan at the issue. There is no plan whatsoever for education. The little money that is budgeted for it, whether 5% is being embezzled by the people that the budget.
Quickly wrap up a thought.
So that is the problem. So what I'm saying is that there should be a plan. And that plan will start by making sure that money is spent available. There should be education tax, no matter how small it is, in which everybody should be involved. That is why those of them in foreign countries, if you go to America now, money for education for the next 50 years is down
your
now.
time is up, actually. Thank you very much for your contribution. Hello, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
You're welcome.
Good morning, my good personality. Good morning, all of you, the resource personnel. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. I remember Mr. Prince Willow from here in Omonachobo.
All right.
I'm very, very grateful on the kind of information and resource persons have given us. Now, let me put my own input. One of the problems we have in education in Nigeria is one, education must be removed from concurrently to exclusively. I quite believe that the primary or elementary education that has been a cradle for anybody to start up before going to anything, before Obasanjo put it on exclusive list. But with time, though that plan has been survived by our governors. They hijacked it like what they hijacked in the local government and the judiciary and the legislature. The executive is because of the problem of having in education. They should leave that particular session to exclusive list. If the money comes, let the primary sector, let them have it and solve their own problem. But today, as I'm talking to you, they have bastardized that plan. Secondly, our educational sector are killing themselves. For instance, in the private sector, the area inspectors of education will go for a supervision. They will collect money and leave the hallmark of education. Like when exams are going on, the AIEs will be going on to various schools. They will see all these anomalies, expo and all the rest of them. They will collect money and leave that anomaly to continue. Believe me, the primary sector is not the best. Rather, it is where the hallmark of irregular.
All right, quickly wrap up yourself, please.
If not, our education should go down to us. That's my thing.
Thank you for your take. Hello, good morning to you. We lost that. Keep your comments coming just as we wrap up the discussion this morning. You can also drop your comments on our Facebook page where we have the visual version of this program running. Of course, you can watch the video of what is happening in the studio. Let's take this and we go with the solution to some of these issues we've raised this morning. Good morning, welcome.
Is Ike calling from Umahia.
All right, Ike Chukwu.
I will start by saying what natural resources refinery is to natural resources like crude oil, and what the industry is, or natural resources, is what education is to human being. It's very unfortunate that our leaders, our government, let me say government, and the people who chair the academic sector have kind of unrevived mindset. Will I say have big leaders who are not, you can't offer what you don't have. You know? If that's why most of them send their children abroad, because they pass vote of no confidence in our health system, including the education system. To me, I don't see any reason why somebody should spend like 4 years in university and 6 years in secondary school when he has already spent 6 years in primary school, which is a basic foundation. We should revive our education system, whereby we can put it 6 years in primary school, 4 or 5 years in secondary school, then 2 years.
Okay, I was just about to tell you to wrap up your thoughts, but thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us, Ike Chukwu. Now, let's look at the solution quickly. Just before we have less than a minute, 2 minutes to step out of the studio this morning, Mr. Richard, we've highlighted a lot of issues this morning. The immediate solution to all these issues, we need to start from somewhere. Where are we starting from?
Okay, let's start out from what it used to be, review it, just like our Dr. Uko has rightly mentioned, being an insider who retired in the system. Let us look at what used to work before and then review it from the current trend and then see the way we move from here. Then I also encourage the state government to go and pick up those funds from ASUBEB, UBEC, that is lying waste. If it is counterpart funding, that money will go a long way to solve most of these issues. And then just like the state coordinator for CSACEFA rightly said, we can come for a roundtable discussion, open up to ourselves and tell ourselves the truth. We can bring in solutions with the government and discuss about that. Like I said, there are also a lot of social responsibilities that are lying there that are untapped from
All
the
right.
banks and the oil workers and others.
All right, Mrs. EUNICE EGBUNA, you've been in charge of welfare this morning on the program. Yes. All right.
Well, we don't have much to say again because we already brought out the whole issues and the solutions. So let the government go back and rethink. We are there, the SECEFA. We can come along with them and then make up, have a date with them and discuss issues like we just mentioned. The doctor mentioned about salaries, how they arranged it. I want to tell you that every teacher is a committed person. They are just being distracted because they are not having this. Even if you tell them it's going to be 3 months, you pay one, and you are regular and consistent. I want to tell you that all those their shops, like he said, or those who have any other thing, they will leave it maybe after the school. They will not go and look about it.
All right. The implication of not following some of these solutions we preferred this morning in years to come, that's where I want you to take it from, Doctor, just before we step out of the studio.
Okay, in the first instance, I want to advise that the budgetary allocation from federal government will be increased, and everything about education should be sponsored directly by the federal government. If you look at the budgetary allocation for more than 20 years, it has not passed 9%. In fact, this year is the worst. This year is about 6.7% from the federal government. So if we have exclusive sponsoring of education in Nigeria from federal government, it will go down. And then we have to remove Nigerian factor in funding education. That's where the trouble is. When you have the money, you divert it to another thing. And then you pretend that those stakeholders in education will not agitate. Take, for instance, the issue of salary. The federal government and the state government, they have good budgetary allocation to it. But it is the performance that is the problem.
Okay. But I know if I allow you, we're going to continue on and on and on. But let's step out of the studio already. I want to really appreciate you, the former Deputy Executive Secretary of the State Education Management Board, Dr. UKO IGBOKWE. Thank you very much for joining us. Mrs. EUNICE EGBUNA, the State Coordinator of SECEFA. I finally got the name correctly. Thank you very much for being part of the program this morning.
Thank
and
you.
Also Mr. Richard OKORO of the Service Delivery of the Open Government Partnership. Thank you very much also for joining us this morning. Do appreciate SECEFA.